episode of A Rare Reality, a podcast powered by Jordan's Guardian Angels. I'm Christina Janes, Director of Outreach and Awareness for JGA, and I am joined today by Lexi Levine, our wonderful JGA sibling. We need to get you a title, Lexi, but in the meantime, we love all that you do for us and with us. And Emily Holl with Kindering and the Sibling Support Project. And this is part 2 of our sibling series aimed more for the adults in the room. So thank you both for being here. Our last podcast for the kids is so informative. And so we're looking forward to bringing this about for the adults too, because there's so much to cover. So thank you.
Thank you for having us.
All right, guys. So Emily, let's start with talking about what the Sibling Support Project is, what you guys do, and all of the resources that you're bringing for parents too.
Absolutely. Yeah, thank you. So the Sibling Support Project is the first national organization in the United States dedicated entirely to supporting siblings of people with developmental health and mental health concerns. And we do that work. First of all, we're located outside of Seattle, Washington, where it's very sunny today. Seattle
Miracles.
Gets a bad rap. Yeah. I know. It actually has been a really rainy spring, so it has earned its reputation this spring. But today it's sunny, so we'll take it. We're located in the state of Washington. We're part of Kindering, as you mentioned, which is Washington State's largest early intervention provider. But we support siblings of all ages, including adults. And we do that work through our books and publications, all of which you can find on our website at siblingsupport.org. We have online communities for siblings, for teens, for sibs in their 20s, and for adult siblings. We do a lot of webinars and conference presentations and lectures for parent groups, for organizations such as yours, where parents are constantly asking for resources and information about siblings. And probably what we're best known for are Sib Shops, which are workshops for kids. We just talked about them on our last pod. Mostly school-aged children, sort of our way of providing those supports early on and in a way that really speaks to kids, which is obviously centered around play and fun. But that's a little bit about us. I think, many of our interventions for adults, we try to incorporate play and fun as well, because we all need a little bit more of that in our lives, don't we?
Right. Don't we all? Yes. On a regular basis. Lexi, it was funny in the last podcast, we were hearing more about, the difficulty of being a sibling and how sometimes it's just really hard when your whole family's going through something like this. It's hard for the kids, it's hard for the adults, and sometimes, clashes happen, and it's difficult because emotions run high. I mean, let's face it, it's not easy. So talk a little bit about your experience and, watching your family go through all of this with your brother Barry.
Yeah, definitely. Emotions definitely ran high in my family with 4 women that were all very protective over Barry. I think, honestly, anytime we faced a big decision, I think at the end of the day, we all wanted the same thing, which was for Barry to be happy and healthy and, live the best quality of life he could. But sometimes that just presented differently. So for me, that presented in, we got to keep him alive because he clearly wants to be alive. He loves to be alive, whatever it takes. Whereas other members of my family more so weren't as concerned about quantity of life, but more quality. Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of times the end message was still the same. We wanted the best for Barry, but the paths were different. Yeah. And I think that would create a lot of tension. I didn't really have a lot of supports like the Sib Shop or Sibling Support Project. And so I didn't really know how to reconcile that tension. So honestly, a lot of times our family didn't. It just came down to, okay, mom gets the final word and that's what it is. And that's what we're going to do, which is a normal way to function in a family. I understand. But this situation was already so different. I had to be so mature and I had to be understanding and I had to understand so many great concepts. Mm-hmm. But yet then when it came down to the most important things, I suddenly was reminded of my place still as a sibling. Right. And that was very, very hard for me to reconcile.
Are there resources for parents that are going through something similar in that way, Emily, that the Sibling Support Project provides?
Well, I think that, when I listen to Lexi, you talk about your family dynamic, I think it's really common. And I think that one of the themes around which that dynamic sort of develops is this topic of future planning, and planning for the future care of the person with a disability. And that sometimes parents have one idea, siblings have another idea, and the person with a disability or with the health condition, they might have a completely different idea.
Right.
And so one of the things that we try to encourage is conversations among families about the future. And, we start as early as in sib shops, in terms of creating opportunities for kids, first of all, to get more information about what's going on with their brother or sister. That transfer of information from parent to child often doesn't happen, right? If we think about parents have access to doctors, clinicians, therapists, social workers, a ton of different professionals to get information about their child's disability or disease. And siblings, if they're lucky, they receive that information from parents. And all too often, again, for the best and most loving reasons, that transfer of information doesn't happen. And so when siblings start to think about their now adult siblings present and future, and siblings start to have maybe different ideas about, well, maybe my sibling could have a job or could live on their own, or could have a little bit more independence, and whatever that means for the person with a disability or disease. Siblings tend to be able to recognize the strengths of their brothers and sisters in ways that parents might not. And so siblings might develop very different ideas about what the possibilities are for the present and the future. And as Lexi so aptly said, well, I would, have this maturity and this expanded understanding of maybe the possibilities for my brother or the realities of his situation. But when I tried to talk to my mom about them, I was quickly put in my place. I was quickly reminded, no, you're just a sibling. And so if we can help families develop a dynamic where every voice matters, every voice is heard, and everyone's input is valued in terms of what the present and the future could look like for the person with a disability, including, of course, the person, right? I mean, we want that person to be front and center, that we're talking about their life after all,
right,
to the greatest extent possible. And even just starting those conversations about what we think the future could look like, oftentimes alleviates a lot of stress, a lot of tension, and a lot of misconceptions, right? Like, I'll tell you a personal story. When we started talking about future planning in my family, I have an older brother with a disability, which is why this work at the Sibling Support Project is so important to me. When we started talking about the future, I had always assumed that my brother would live with me. That was just the plan. It was something that, I talked with, potential like serious life partners about, like, hey, guess what? A future with me is probably going to entail a future with my brother as well in some way, shape, or form. Anyway, when we started talking about this as a family, my brother, very kindly, but very in no uncertain terms said, well, Emily, like, no offense, but I don't really want to live with you, like, at all. And I was kind of taken aback. I was like, well, that was, but that was this assumption that I had for, 30 years at that point. And so we really had to talk about what the future really could look like based on what everyone wanted and what was realistic based on what was available for services and supports.
Yeah. Something that comes up a lot for our families and that they don't necessarily always think about or want to think about are the big plans for the future, the trust, what does that look like? Are there, is that something that's touched on too, to provide that kind of support? Because that's a tough conversation to have.
Absolutely. So there are a number of future planning resources that we like to share. We do offer future planning workshops for families, through organizations that want to host them, which is wonderful because then you get groups of families, including siblings, including the person with the disability, including parents, going through this process, right? This multi-session process, at the end of which you've not only had some of those conversations, but you've started to create your roadmap for the future in a very concrete letter of intent. We also partner with the Sibling Leadership Network, and I want everyone to know about this organization. It is an amazing organization. It's kind of a sister organization to us. Of course, we have to write sibling sister. They are an amazing organization that really is designed to support adult siblings of people with disabilities. They have state chapters in 26 or 27 states. If you go to their website, which is siblingleadership.org, so siblingleadership.org, you can find out if there's a chapter in your state where you can connect with other adult siblings and find out some resources for future planning, and also just the power to be able to connect with other adult siblings, which I know, Lexi, you've talked about, even in just joining our SibNet group, our online community for adult siblings. The ARC of the United States also has a Center for Future Planning. So if you Google ARC Center for Future Planning, or maybe you'll put it in the show notes, they have a really awesome online tool that families can use to start the future planning process. It's completely free. So that's a really nice place to start as well.
Perfect. It's a tough topic, but it's also something that's so necessary. And many of our families have said, I don't even know where to start. I don't know who I would contact. Who can I trust? So it's great information. Another topic that comes up a lot for adults, finding the balance. How do you find time for yourself? How do you find time for your child who has special needs? How do you find time for your other children? How do you work that out? Because many of our parents say, there's just not enough there aren't enough hours in the day. So Emily, is that something that you're able to touch on too?
Yeah, I think that's one of the commonalities between parents and siblings, who tend to be really terrible at self-care. And I'll just be honest about it, because I am one of the siblings who's terrible at self-care. Because I'm one of those siblings who's always taking care of everyone else, my own kids, my aging dad at this point, my brother, Lexi, you could probably speak to this as a sibling who, although Barry is no longer with us, who's very much shaped who you are and how you approach your relationships and your work, and probably wanting to take care of everyone. I think that parents and siblings share that. And so respite is always a really lovely thing if you can find it in your community. There's never enough of it. But also, in terms of parents supporting themselves and also supporting siblings, because, siblings tell us all the time, gosh, looking back, if there's one thing I could have changed about how my parents, coped raising us and, raising me and raising my sib with a disability, I wish they had spent more time caring for themselves, like recharging the batteries. And that's a really hard thing for a lot of parents to do, but so necessary, right? It's like the metaphor of when you're on the plane, they always say, if the plane is going down, you have to put on your own oxygen mask first before you can assist any people who are depending on you. And so I think that it's challenging, but it's really necessary. And I think now there's more and more resources out there for siblings and parents about self-care and balancing and allowing yourself that grace to recharge your own batteries. I think that, Lexi, do you want to talk a little bit about how that works for you?
Yeah, just so much of what you said is literally my exact experience. I will just give another example of how common it is for siblings to have one idea and then parents have another idea of what the future will look like. Me and my sister, we both independently thought that we would eventually care for Barry. And then one day in our childhood, we somehow got on the topic of this. And then we realized my mom, as a single mom, was just burning herself out completely by doing this every day. And so we had the great idea that we were going to live next door to each other and have 2 sets of equipment for Barry, and we were going to switch off every day so neither of us would get too burnt out. And when my mom learned of this plan, she was like, absolutely not. You guys have your own lives. You're going to go do whatever you want, and Barry will have his life, and you'll all see each other, but you're not doing that. And I was like, yeah, okay. You won't be here when that time comes, and I'll take care of him, no problem. So I can't stress the importance of having these kinds of conversations. And yeah, like I think and talk about this a lot now. Like my poor mom, we call her Saint Joanne because her needs still just always come last. Like it's just unreal to watch how she can just like power through anything to just get something done so it will be done, and just put herself absolutely last. Like there's so many days where we'll be running around and I'll be like, did you eat anything today? You know, and I think like when I was younger and I couldn't think that way, like who was looking out for her? Like nobody. And so yeah, I just, all those things are so very important.
Yeah. Lexi, quickly, your message for parents out there, because you have watched, as you just said, you watched your own mom go through this as an adult sibling. Now, your message for the adults in people's lives right now, that, you know, it's okay to ask for help. It's okay to seek advice. I mean, it's so important to hear.
Definitely. And it sets that example for the kids too, because exactly like Emily was saying earlier, like us sibs, we tend to be people who are not good at caring for ourselves either. And honestly, that's because that's the model I learned. Like I learned to just, you don't relax until everything's done kind of thing. And, you know, it doesn't really have to be that way all the time when you're not in like critical stress mode at all moments.
Yeah. And Emily, your takeaway for our parents who are watching this today, you provided amazing resources for them already, and for them to be able to connect with the Sibling Support Project will be huge. But what's your message? I mean, you see these families on a regular basis going through very difficult times. You're living it yourself. So what's your message for them too?
Well, I think, first of all, in terms of supporting siblings of all ages, including adults, I think that one important takeaway is that a little goes a long way. And we recognize parents are so stretched, right? Like Lexi, you talk about growing up, seeing how burnt out your mom was. And a lot of siblings grow up in a similar way with that same observation. And so I think, you know, part of it is to recognize that supporting siblings, you know, a little goes a long way in terms of, you know, it's those small, consistent gestures, right? That it's carving out 10 minutes a day or 10 minutes whenever you can to take a walk, or maybe you're running errands and maybe it's just something that you can do with just the sibling. Or, you know, I talk about keeping little journals, which even for adults, I think is such a great idea because many of us journal anyway. But to make that a communication vehicle for parents and siblings to kind of share little messages or notes or whatever it is, to just let the person know that, hey, I'm thinking of you. Carving out time to do a picnic or go on a hike or get manicures together or whatever it is, you know, whatever it is, just to carve out that time. And then I think, you know, back to our conversation about self-care, I love this expression that an empty lantern provides no light. You know, it just speaks, I think, so much to the need for us to allow ourselves to refuel, you know, to enable us to provide that light that we want to for the people who we love.
Yeah, 100%. You both are amazing. Thank you for all of the work that you're doing for so many people across the country, around the world. I know our families are deeply grateful, and we are too. So thank you for your insight. Lexi, I will see you in person in just a few weeks here. Yes. And I can't wait to hear all about everything that our siblings have coming for them. I'm so excited. So thank you both. And we're going to make sure we provide all of those resources that you gave to us today, Emily. They'll be in the notes section for the podcast. And again, for all of you who are watching, who are listening, you can find the podcast on all major platforms and on jordansguardianangels.org as well. So thank you guys again. If there's ever anything that we can do to help, please, please, please feel free to reach out. And in the meantime, we're super grateful. So thank you.